The Sioux, one of North America's oldest Native American tribes, have a storied legacy stretching back thousands of years. At the height of their influence, they controlled vast territories, making their mark as one of the most influential and recognized tribes in U.S. history. The Sioux's ancestors are believed to have lived in the central Mississippi Valley, migrating to Minnesota around 800 AD, and by 1300 AD, they had formed a close-knit society known as the Seven Council Fires, comprising seven kin-based bands united by shared dialects and geographic connections. Today, descendants of these seven bands continue to govern independently, with the three primary groups being the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota, each name translating to friend or ally. This bond extended beyond humans. The Sioux saw animals as kin and believed in a sacred connection among all life forms. Their guiding spiritual figure, the white buffalo calf woman, brought teachings from the Great Spirit, introducing the seven sacred rites that emphasized respect for life, kinship, and harmony. Before European contact, the Dakota Sioux lived near Lake Superior, relying on wild rice, deer, buffalo, and fish. However, conflicts in the 1700s with the Ojibwe drove them further west into what are now Minnesota and the Dakotas. With the arrival of horses, the Lakota and Nakota adapted to a nomadic lifestyle, following buffalo herds and trading extensively with neighboring tribes. In time, alliances and conflicts arose, leading to encounters with European settlers and rival tribes. Sioux communities thrived on strong family ties, with appointed leaders fostering a deep sense of identity. Life was organized by age and gender, with men responsible for hunting, trade, and defense, while women managed the household, prepared hides, cooked, and performed intricate quill work. Children helped gather firewood, care for animals, and support daily tasks. Elders, respected for their wisdom, often guided the young and cared for infants, preserving the tribe's values and traditions. As trade expanded, the Sioux forged connections with French traders, joining other tribes in the fur trade, a pivotal moment that would shape their history and relationships with European settlers and neighboring tribes alike. The Sioux's resilient culture, rich in spirituality and tradition, remains an enduring testament to their history and heritage. The first recorded encounter between the Sioux and the French occurred when explorers Radisson and Groseilliers ventured into what is now Wisconsin during the winter of 1659 to 1660. The relationship between the Sioux and Ojibwe was complex. In 1679, they formed an alliance through peaceful diplomacy at Fond du Lac in present-day Minnesota. The Ojibwe agreed to supply the Sioux with fur trade goods, and in return, the Sioux allowed the Ojibwe to move westward toward the Mississippi River. This peaceful coexistence, lasting 57 years, saw both tribes hunting together, intermarrying, and sharing religious and cultural practices. However, tensions rose as the Dakota began to resent the Ojibwe's trade with their enemies, the Cree and Assiniboine, with whom the Dakota were at war. French traders, leveraging the rivalry, exacerbated tensions by favoring both sides. By the 1720s, strained relations escalated, sparking the Sioux-Ojibwe War in 1736. The Sioux no longer depended on the Ojibwe for trade and opposed their presence in Dakota lands, while the Ojibwe, now established for nearly 3 generations, were determined to defend their territory. The war expanded into a lasting conflict across a front stretching from central Wisconsin to Minnesota and the Red River. With travel and trade blocked along this frontier, the conflict redirected fur traders to northern routes, favoring the Cree and Ojibwe and isolating the Sioux market. The Ojibwe soon occupied waterways from Grand Portage to Rainy Lake, pushing south towards Sioux settlements at Leech, Red, and Sandy Lakes. By the end of 40 years, they had claimed northern Minnesota as their own. In 1770, one of the larger battles erupted at the Dalles of the St. Croix. Historian William Whipple Warren documented how the Meskwaki, historic foes of the Ojibwe, joined the Dakota to launch a joint attack on the Ojibwe. Despite initial Meskwaki confidence, the battle turned as the Ojibwe reinforcements arrived, leading to significant casualties on both sides, with the Meskwaki suffering the heaviest losses. Ultimately, The Ojibwe secured control of the upper St. Croix, creating an informal boundary near the Snake River. For south, the Dakota Sioux lost traditional lands around Leech Lake and Mille Lacs, relocating along the Mississippi River and St. Croix River valleys. As the Lakota and Nakota Sioux journeyed west into the prairies, they adopted new customs from neighboring Plains tribes, integrating horses and fur trade practices into their culture. Meanwhile, the Dakota Sioux retained many traditional woodland customs. By 1803, the Sioux had firmly established three divisions: Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, each with distinct lifeways yet bound by shared cultural values, preserving the unity of the Sioux nation amidst their diverse environments. As the western frontier expanded, the Sioux fiercely defended their lands against further encroachment. With the arrival of settlers following the California Gold Rush in 1849 and the U.S. government's establishment of the Bozeman Trail through Sioux territory, tensions grew. In 1851, the Fort Laramie Treaty promised safe passage along the Oregon Trail, but an incident soon shattered this peace. In 1854, a stray cow from a Mormon party wandered into a Sioux camp. The Mormons, fearful of the Sioux, reported the cow as stolen to Fort Laramie soldiers. Lieutenant John Grattan led a detachment to the Sioux village, demanding the arrest of a man he accused of killing the cow. When he was refused, Grattan ordered an attack, and Chief Conquering Bear was killed. The Sioux retaliated, wiping out Grattan's entire detachment. In 1855, General William S. Harney retaliated by attacking a Sioux village at Blue Water, killing 85 people and taking 70 women and children captive. Meanwhile, settlers continued to push Sioux communities further west. In 1862, under Chief Little Crow, the Dakota Sioux launched raids on settlements and military outposts, leading to brutal conflicts at Fort Ridgely and Wood Lake. Although Little Crow's raids initially found success, they were ultimately outgunned, and many Sioux fled north. Those who remained faced harsh consequences. In December 1862, President Abraham Lincoln ordered the execution of 38 Dakota Sioux in Mankato, Minnesota, the largest mass execution in U.S. history. After the Civil War, a new trail pioneered by John Bozeman cut through prime Sioux hunting grounds, drawing more settlers to Montana. In response, the Sioux allied with the Cheyenne and Arapaho to resist incursions. Red Cloud, a prominent leader, met with U.S. officials at Fort Laramie in 1866 to negotiate, but upon realizing their intentions, he prepared for war. The Army began constructing forts along the Bozeman Trail, including Fort Phil Kearny and Fort C.F. Smith. That winter, Crazy Horse lured soldiers into an ambush, resulting in the devastating Fetterman Massacre, where 80 U.S. soldiers were killed. With the Transcontinental Railroad nearing completion, the U.S. government eventually abandoned the Bozeman forts in 1868 through another Fort Laramie Treaty. Red Cloud and the Sioux celebrated by burning the forts to the ground. However, the railroad continued to disrupt Sioux life. The construction frightened off the buffalo, the Plains natives' essential resource, and mass hunting by settlers decimated the herds. In the 1870s, both the Sioux and U.S. settlers violated the treaty, escalating tensions further. The discovery of gold in the Black Hills, sacred to the Sioux, triggered a surge of miners into the region. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse rallied their people to resist, while General Sherman and Sheridan led U.S. forces. Conflict erupted when the military ordered native hunting bans into reservations, warning that those who resisted would be labeled hostiles. This standoff marked the beginning of a new, fierce chapter in the Sioux's battle for survival and sovereignty on their ancestral lands. In March 1876, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors won a critical victory against the U.S. Army at Montana's Powder River, inflicting significant casualties. That summer, a large-scale U.S. military campaign began, with three columns advancing from different directions: General George Crook from the south, Colonel John Gibbon from the west, and General Alfred Terry, with Colonel George A. Custer from the east. On June 17th, Crazy Horse led 700 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors in a fierce attack on Crook's 1,000-man force, forcing them to retreat with heavy losses. The Sioux and Cheyenne, then gathered on the Little Bighorn River at a place known as Greasy Grass with an encampment of about 7,000 people, including 1,800 warriors. On June 21st, Terry and Gibbon's forces united, and Major Marcus Reno's scouting party located the native camp. Terry ordered Custer's 7th Cavalry to intercept the camp from the south while other troops approached from the north. But when Custer's scouts reported the camp's location, he chose to launch an immediate attack instead of waiting. The decision was disastrous. On June 25th, Custer and his 200 men were overwhelmed, and none survived. This would be the last major victory for Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Chief Gall. In the months that followed, the Sioux and Cheyenne suffered numerous defeats. Sitting Bull fled to Canada, and Crazy Horse surrendered in 1877, later dying in custody. In 1881, Sitting Bull returned and surrendered, eventually relocating to the Standing Rock Agency. Tragically, he was killed in 1890 while resisting arrest. The final chapter of the Sioux resistance began with the Ghost Dance movement in 1890, led by the Paiute mystic Wovoka. He preached that the dance would bring about a new world, where ancestors would return, buffalo herds would roam again, and the plains would be freed from settlers. Belief in the ghost dance was so strong that many Sioux believed their ghost dance shirts could protect them from bullets. The U.S. government, alarmed by the movement, banned the ghost dance on Sioux reservations. Indian police attempted to arrest Sitting Bull, a prominent supporter, but a confrontation resulted in his death. Bigfoot, another leader, led his followers toward the Pine Ridge Agency for safety, but the 7th Cavalry intercepted them. They were forced to camp at Wounded Knee Creek. On December 29, 1890, a scuffle broke out, a shot was fired, and Colonel James Forsyth ordered the soldiers to open fire. Artillery was used against the fleeing Sioux, and over 250 men, women, and children were killed, marking the tragic end of the Sioux resistance. Following these conflicts, the U.S. government enforced policies to assimilate Native Americans. Children were sent to boarding schools designed to kill the Indian to save the man, where they were given English names, dressed in American clothing, and forbidden to speak their languages or practice their traditions. These schools were overcrowded and unsanitary, resulting in illness and, in many cases, death. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 eventually marked a shift, ending forced assimilation policies, recognizing tribal governments, and allowing Native people more control over their lands and resources. This act provided a glimmer of hope for preserving their culture and rebuilding their communities. Between 1934 and 1945, Native tribes were encouraged to vote on new governmental constitutions, though some opted to retain their traditional forms of governance. In the following decades, policies aimed at Native communities had mixed impacts, with both beneficial and detrimental effects. As the civil rights movement gained momentum, Native Americans established the American Indian Movement, AM, bringing national attention to the struggles of Native communities. However, political divisions on reservations often intensified as accusations of corruption within tribal leadership stirred unrest. The most notable response to these tensions occurred on February 27, 1973, when AM activists seized the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota. For 71 days, Native Americans from various communities gathered in protest, demanding changes to both local governance and federal policies impacting reservations. The standoff drew attention from state and federal agencies, including the FBI and the U.S. Marshal Service, which laid siege to the town. By the time the siege ended, 12 individuals were wounded, including an FBI agent left paralyzed, and 2 people had lost their lives, with 2 others reported missing. Following the Wounded Knee incident, the Sioux remained steadfast in their pursuit of tribal rights and self-determination. Another significant stand involved the Black Hills, a sacred area taken from the Sioux. In 1980, after years of legal battles, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the federal government had unlawfully seized the Black Hills, awarding over $100 million in reparations. Yet, the Sioux, affirming that their land was never for sale, refused the payment, a sum now exceeding $1 billion. In the early 21st century, The estimated population of individuals with Sioux heritage was around 170,000, underscoring the resilience of Sioux culture and identity in the face of historical and ongoing challenges. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new videos from us. What do you think about today's topic? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found the video helpful, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We hope you had a great time. See you in the next video with even more exciting content. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.